11:14 a.m. local time. Strait of Hormuz. USS Porter, cutting steady, wake through one of the most contested waterways on the planet. Nothing in the traffic pattern looked extraordinary. Commercial tankers held their lanes. Civilian fishing dhows drifted in loose arcs. Small motorcraft moved between them in routine coastal rhythms. The destroyer's radar picture was dense but normal. 20, 30, sometimes 50 small returns inside a 5-mile radius was not unusual in these waters. At 11:14:32, that normality ended. Multiple small craft accelerating, bearing 091, range 800 meters. The voice in Combat Information Center was calm. It always was. USS Porter, an Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyer, had been conducting freedom of navigation operations for 6 consecutive days. Aegis systems active. SPY-1D radar, sweeping in disciplined cycles. Close-in weapon systems in standby. On board, 140 sailors and 80 Marines assigned to ship security and anti-boarding defense. They had rehearsed this. They had just never seen it unfold this fast. At 11:15:04, 12 wooden fishing vessels that had been drifting at low speed abruptly throttled up. Their bows lifted, their wakes sharpened into white streaks aimed directly at the destroyer's port and starboard flanks. Behind them, 10 low-profile fast attack boats broke formation and surged forward, engines screaming. This was no accident of navigation, this was geometry. General quarters, all hands man your battle stations. Klaxons tore through passageways, hatches slammed, sailors dropped tools and sprinted. Marines moved in controlled lines toward pre-assigned deck sectors, rifles already being chambered. Distance, 600 meters. Time to contact, less than 1 minute. At 11:15:38, the lead fishing vessel closed to within 300 meters. No distress call, no deviation, only acceleration. Hostile intent confirmed. Weapons free. The Phalanx CIWS mounted forward, rotated with mechanical precision. Its radar locked. The Gatling gun spooled up. The low grinding roar escalating into a continuous metallic scream as 20mm rounds tore across open water. The first fast boat disintegrated under direct impact, its fiberglass hull shredding in a flash of spray and fire. But the fishing vessels were already too close. At 11:16:02, 3 of them slammed against Porter's hull almost simultaneously. Grappling hooks arced upward, steel clanged against railing, rope ladders dropped. 50 Iranian Revolutionary Guard commandos surged from beneath tarps and false decking, AK pattern rifles already firing as they began climbing. They had concealed themselves for 20 minutes among nets and diesel fumes. Now they moved with rehearsed speed. 2 Marines on the weather deck were hit in the opening burst. One fell instantly. The other crawled toward cover, returning fire in controlled pairs. Boarders on port side, multiple climbers. The first Iranian commando reached the rail at 11:16:27. He did not hesitate. He vaulted onto the deck firing. Within seconds, more followed. The fight compressed into brutal proximity. No missile systems, no long-range radar solutions. Steel decks, 20 yards, sometimes 5. The Iranian plan was direct. Overwhelm the topside crew, seize the bridge, force entry into engineering spaces, and announce control before reinforcements could arrive. Shock, speed, narrative dominance. But they had miscalculated one variable. USS Porter was not a soft target. By 11:17, interior security protocols had sealed critical compartments. Blast doors secured the reactor space. Bridge access was locked behind reinforced steel. Engineering control shifted to internal redundancy. Even if the deck was contested, the ship could not be sailed. On the weather deck, Captain Elena Mitchell received the first confirmed count. Estimated 40 to 50 hostile boarders. She did not raise her voice. Seal all primary access points. Bridge remains locked. Marines hold the line. We are not losing this ship. At 11:18, the Iranian commandos controlled portions of the outer deck. They had gained physical presence. They had inflicted casualties. Smoke drifted across the superstructure from small arms impacts and minor fires. But they had not breached command. They had not reached propulsion. They had not taken navigation. Below decks, 60 Marines maneuvered through interior corridors, preparing to counter-assault upward. Outside, the remaining Iranian fast attack boats circled aggressively, firing sporadic suppressive bursts to pin defenders and discourage movement along open railings. The Strait of Hormuz had transformed in under 3 minutes from routine patrol zone into a live boarding engagement. And somewhere 48 kilometers north, USS Bataan had just received the distress call. The clock had started. 26 minutes. At 11:19:12, the first counter-movement began. Below the deck plates, Marines stacked in tight formation near an internal ladder well. "On my mark," the platoon leader said quietly. Above them, Iranian commandos were advancing toward the bridge access corridor, believing momentum still belonged to them. They were wrong. The destroyer was contested, not captured, and the response was already in motion. 11:19:34 local time. Inside the passageways below the weather deck, the sound was different from topside gunfire. Muted, metallic, close, boots against steel ladders, controlled breathing inside Kevlar helmets, the click of safeties disengaging. 60 U.S. Marines were moving in 2 assault elements through the interior spine of USS Porter. Their objective was not emotional retaliation, it was geometry. Retake vertical control. Topside, approximately 50 Iranian commandos had established fragmented positions along the port and starboard outer decks. They had not seized unified control, but they had created chaos. Several had attempted to force access toward the bridge superstructure using cutting torches and shaped charges. Others laid suppressive fire toward exposed defensive positions. But the ship's defensive doctrine had already closed the critical arteries. Reactor compartment, sealed. Engineering, isolated. Bridge access, hardened and locked. Even if the deck was contested, propulsion and navigation were beyond reach. At 11:20:02, the first U.S. counter-assault element reached Ladder Well 3, directly beneath the primary bridge access corridor. Stack. 4 Marines aligned, 1 above, 3 behind. M4 carbines raised. Topside, Iranian commandos were focused outward, toward the railings, toward suppressing fire positions, toward the illusion that momentum remained theirs. They did not expect pressure from below. At 11:20:19, the ladder hatch burst open. The first Marine emerged low and left, firing controlled pairs into 2 armed silhouettes only 12 feet away. Both Iranian fighters fell instantly. The second Marine pivoted right, engaging a third attempting to swing his rifle toward the hatch. Within 4 seconds, 3 boarders were down. The geometry shifted. "Counterattack! Counterattack!" one Iranian voice shouted in Farsi across the deck. But space was tight. Movement lanes were narrow. Railings, lifeboat mounts, and deck equipment created hard angles and dead zones. The Marines advanced in fire team bounds, never clustering, always overlapping sectors of fire. No heroics. Procedure. At 11:21, a second internal hatch opened near the port side aft deck. Another Marine element emerged behind a cluster of Iranian commandos attempting to cut through a sealed access door. They were caught between 2 disciplined firing arcs. 5 were eliminated within seconds. The boarding force had assumed top-down dominance. Instead, they were being compressed. Meanwhile, outside the hull, 8 remaining Iranian fast attack boats attempted to reposition closer, firing sporadic bursts toward visible Marine positions. Their intent was clear: maintain external pressure, prevent consolidation, buy time for boarders to secure the bridge. They did not know that help was already airborne. At 11:21:48, 48 kilometers north, USS Bataan had already launched its response package. 8 MV-22B Ospreys lifted in rapid sequence, each carrying 30 fully equipped Marines. Their rotors beat the air in synchronized thunder as they accelerated south at over 240 knots. 4 AH-1Z Viper attack helicopters followed, armed with AGM-114 Hellfire missiles, 70mm rockets, and 20mm cannons. Estimated arrival, 12 minutes. Back aboard Porter, the fight intensified. At 11:22:03, an Iranian commando detonated a fragmentation grenade near the portside railing. 2 Marines were wounded, one critically. The blast wave rattled communications equipment, but did not compromise structure. Smoke thickened across sections of the deck. Visibility shrank. Engagement distance compressed to under 10 yards. An Iranian team made a final push toward the bridge access corridor, dragging portable cutting equipment and attempting to exploit momentary suppressive fire from a fast attack boat outside. They reached within 15 feet of the sealed access door. Inside the bridge, Commander Mitchell stood armed alongside 20 sailors, sidearms drawn, emergency shotguns positioned. If the door failed, the fight would be immediate. But at 11:22:41, the interior Marine element struck again, from behind. The Iranian team never completed their breach attempt. 3 fell instantly. 2 attempted to retreat along the starboard walkway and were intercepted by overlapping Marine fire. By 11:23, the number of active boarders had dropped from approximately 50 to 32, but the deck remained contested. Several Iranian fighters had taken positions behind deck-mounted equipment and were firing controlled bursts toward Marine movement corridors. The fight was no longer a rush. It was attrition. At 11:23:27, one Iranian fast attack boat closed within 200 meters and fired a short rocket burst. The projectiles impacted the waterline short of the destroyer, but sent shockwaves across the hull. That proximity mattered. USS Porter's aft phalanx system reoriented automatically and opened fire. The 20mm stream tore across the approaching boat. The hull shattered under impact. The vessel erupted in flame and capsized within seconds. 7 external boats remained. On deck, the remaining boarders began consolidating near midship structures, attempting to form a defensive pocket. They were no longer advancing. They were holding. At 11:24:10, Captain Mitchell received the updated status. Bridge secure, engineering secure, boarders contained midship. She responded with a single instruction: compress them. The Marines did not rush. They tightened the circle. At 11:24:38, controlled suppressive fire pinned the Iranian pocket, while 2 Marine elements maneuvered along opposite sides of the superstructure, narrowing escape routes. Another 4 boarders fell. One attempted to leap back over the railing toward a fishing vessel still lashed to the hull. He was cut down before reaching the ladder. Below the horizon to the north, the first faint silhouettes of inbound aircraft began to register on radar. Reinforcement was now 8 minutes away. On deck, the number of active Iranian commandos had fallen below 25. They had achieved surprise. They had inflicted casualties. But they had not achieved control. And the 26-minute response was only halfway complete. 11:24:52 local time. The deck of USS Porter no longer belonged to the attackers. It belonged to the clock. 25 Iranian commandos remained active on the weather decks, compressed into 2 fragmented pockets, one near midship starboard, the other aft port side, near a cluster of tied-off fishing vessels still hooked to the hull. They were no longer advancing toward the bridge. They were fighting to avoid encirclement. Marine fire teams moved with deliberate spacing, clearing angles, controlling vertical access points. No pursuit into blind corners, no overextension. Port side element hold, starboard push 5 meters, maintain crossfire. Every order was measured. At 11:25:11, an Iranian commando attempted to deploy a second fragmentation grenade toward a Marine stack advancing along the superstructure bulkhead. He was engaged mid-motion. The grenade detonated at his feet. 2 more boarders fell in the concussive wave. Below decks, damage control teams continued isolating compromised compartments. Fire suppression foam was deployed near a scorched radar relay junction, power rerouted through redundant circuits. The destroyer was wounded, but she was functioning. Outside the hull, 6 remaining Iranian fast attack boats had repositioned beyond immediate phalanx range, firing sporadic bursts toward visible deck silhouettes. Their intent had shifted from support to extraction. They were trying to recover surviving boarders. At 11:25:38, one fishing vessel attempted to cut its grappling lines and pull away from the destroyer's port quarter. Its engine roared, its bow shifted. It did not clear the hull. USS Porter's aft, 25mm Mark 38 chain gun engaged at 400 meters. The burst was short, controlled, The fishing vessel's engine compartment ignited. The boat drifted, burning, still tethered. 4 external boats remained fully maneuverable. At 11:26:02, a Marine squad executed a coordinated flank from the aft ladder well, emerging behind the larger Iranian pocket near midship. The attackers were now engaged from 3 angles: forward, aft, and lateral. They attempted a breakout toward the starboard rail. They were met with interlocking fire. Within 90 seconds, 7 more commandos were down. 18 remained. At 11:26:47, the first inbound radar confirmation came from USS Baton's response package. Vipers entering engagement envelope, 3 minutes. Above the Strait of Hormuz, 4 AH-1Z'd. Viper helicopters descended to low altitude, their targeting systems already locking onto the cluster of hostile small craft surrounding Porter. They did not hesitate. At 11:27:18, 2 AGM-114 Hellfire missiles streaked from the lead Viper toward a fast attack boat maneuvering 600 meters off the destroyer's port side. Impact was immediate. The vessel disintegrated in a contained fireball, secondary detonations suggesting onboard munitions. The remaining boats scattered. It did not help. The second Viper released 2 more Hellfires in rapid succession. Both struck separate targets attempting high-speed withdrawal toward Iranian waters. Within 40 seconds, 3 more boats were destroyed. 1 remained. On deck, the psychological shift was visible. The Iranian commandos could hear the rotor wash above. They could see the burning wreckage of their support craft. Extraction was gone. At 11:27:59, the final fast attack boat attempted full-speed retreat. A 70mm rocket salvo intercepted it less than a kilometer from the destroyer. The last external support asset vanished in flame. All Iranian boats were now destroyed or disabled. The boarders were alone. At 11:28:14, the first 2 MV-22 Ospreys appeared over the horizon. They did not circle. They came direct. 8 aircraft in staggered descent, rotors thundering, each carrying 30 additional Marines in full combat load. USS Porter's deck was still contested, but it was stabilizing. At 11:28:37, the remaining Iranian fighters, now reduced to approximately 15, consolidated near midship equipment racks, forming a tight defensive cluster. They fired in disciplined bursts, conserving ammunition. They were no longer maneuvering, they were surviving. Captain Mitchell's voice remained steady over internal comms. Clear landing sectors, maintain suppression, reinforcements inbound. At 11:29:02, the first Osprey hovered above the destroyer's aft deck. Fast ropes dropped instantly. Marines descended in synchronized sequence, boots striking steel within seconds. 30 fresh Marines hit the deck in under 12 seconds. The second Osprey inserted forward of midship, then a third. Within 45 seconds, 90 additional Marines were on board. The numerical ratio had shifted decisively. 18 Iranian commandos against over 200 US Marines. But numbers alone were not decisive. Control was. At 11:29:51, Marine squad leaders reorganized into coordinated sweep formations. Fire discipline tightened further. No stray bursts, no wasted motion. They advanced in compressed arcs, reducing space. An Iranian fighter attempted a last charge toward the superstructure. He was neutralized within 3 steps. At 11:30:22, a cluster of 5 commandos attempted to push toward the port railing, possibly seeking suicide detonation against the hull. They were intercepted before reaching detonation range. By 11:31, the number of active Iranian boarders had dropped below 10. The 26-minute window was closing, and the counteroffensive was no longer reactive. It was systematic. 11:31:08 local time. The final phase began without announcement. There were no dramatic speeches, no cinematic pauses, only tightening geometry. 9 Iranian commandos remained alive on the deck of USS Porter. All were cut off from extraction. All were operating with depleted ammunition. All were compressed into a shrinking corridor between the starboard midship bulkhead and the forward superstructure ladder well. They had lost maneuver space. They had lost initiative. They had lost time. At 11:31:22, Marine squads completed the containment arc. 2 fire teams held elevated angles from the bridge wings. 3 more advanced low along deck cover points. Overwatch remained disciplined, no uncontrolled volleys. The Iranian fighters attempted a final coordinated burst toward the nearest marine element. It failed, 3 fell within seconds, 6 remained. Below decks, status reports flowed in steady cadence. Reactor secure, engine room intact, bridge fully operational, combat systems online. Damage control teams reported superficial blast scoring near the forward radar array and localized fragmentation damage along the port rail. No structural compromise, no propulsion loss. The destroyer was bruised, but she was operational. At 11:32:05, the remaining 6 Iranian commandos withdrew toward the starboard rail, attempting to use equipment lockers as improvised cover. They were no longer advancing. They were holding ground they could not keep. The 4th and 5th Ospreys inserted additional Marines onto cleared landing zones. Within 30 seconds, the total Marine presence aboard Porter exceeded 240 personnel. The ratio was no longer tactical. It was absolute. At 11:32:41, one Iranian fighter attempted to detonate a grenade while retreating toward the rail. He was engaged before he could arm it. 5 remained. Advance by bounds, no rush, clear deliberately. The command tone remained controlled. At 11:33:18, a coordinated Marine push from port and starboard sides collapsed the final defensive pocket. 2 commandos were neutralized in crossfire. Another was incapacitated attempting to climb back down a rope ladder toward a burning fishing vessel still tethered to the hull. 4 remained. Smoke from destroyed boats drifted across the water in black columns. Debris floated in widening circles around the destroyer. The Strait of Hormuz had become a controlled battlefield. At 11:34:02, the last 4 Iranian commandos made their final stand along the starboard equipment rack cluster. Ammunition expended. Movement restricted, no exit. They fired until their weapons ran dry. At 11:34:19, the final exchange ended. All 50 Iranian boarders were down. No surrender requests, no escape attempts remaining. The deck fell silent except for rotor wash and the crackle of residual fires. 11:34:43. 26 minutes after the first grappling hook struck steel, USS Porter was secure. Marine sweep teams conducted compartment-by-compartment clearance. Each ladder well inspected, each access hatch verified, each external mount checked for secondary threats. At 11:35:27, Captain Mitchell transmitted the confirmation. Boarding threat neutralized, ship secure, casualty assessment ongoing. Medical teams moved immediately. 19 American personnel had been killed during the initial assault phase, 43 wounded, several critically. Stabilization procedures began on deck before evacuation to USS Baton's medical facilities. Victory did not erase loss. It confirmed survival. At 11:36, the AH-1Z Vipers completed overwatch passes across the debris field. No hostile surface contacts remained operational. 22 Iranian vessels destroyed or disabled. No extraction craft survived. Below the surface, P-8 maritime patrol aircraft extended sonar coverage to confirm no additional submarine presence. No further torpedo transients detected. The assault had been total, so had the response. At 11:37, Fleet Command authorized calibrated retaliation against infrastructure directly tied to the boarding attempt. This was not escalation through emotion. It was doctrine. USS Baton launched a limited strike package, F/A-18S, armed with precision-guided GBU-39 small-diameter bombs. Targets were restricted to identified Revolutionary Guard naval staging facilities and commando training compounds associated with the operation. No civilian infrastructure targeted. No area bombardment. Precision. Within the hour, 6 Iranian support sites were struck. The message was structured. Boarding an American warship was not a symbolic act. It was an act of war. By 12:05, smoke still rose from destroyed boats around USS Porter. The destroyer resumed controlled maneuvering. Radar arrays recalibrated. Flight operations from the carrier group continued. The strike group did not retreat. It tightened formation. Intelligence officers began immediate exploitation of recovered Iranian equipment. AK-103 rifles, encrypted radios, cutting torches, grappling systems, serial numbers documented, comms devices isolated. Every detail would be analyzed. Because the story was not only tactical, it was strategic. Iran's plan had relied on surprise, proximity, and shock value. The objective had been a propaganda image, a captured American destroyer in international waters. Instead, the result was documented failure inside 26 minutes, 50 boarders dead, 22 boats destroyed, 6 support sites struck, USS Porter operational. The Strait of Hormuz returned to surface calm by mid-afternoon. Tankers resumed transit. Civilian radar feeds normalized. From a distance, nothing appeared altered. But within military planning rooms across the region, a calculation had shifted. Seizing a U.S. warship required more than ropes and numbers. It required control of time. And for 26 minutes, time belonged to the defenders. The final log entry aboard USS Porter was simple. Boarding attempt repelled, vessel secure, mission continues. No further commentary was added. The clock had run, and it had not favored the attackers.